Most people on the road today don't know how to perform a basic inspection on their vehicle. The reason this is a problem is because a basic inspection can help you find unexpected problems with your car, like a burnt out brake light bulb, or find something potentially catastrophic like a loose engine drain plug from your last oil change. So in today's video, I'm going to give you guys my top 10 things to look for during your basic inspection. Now, of course, keep in mind there may be some differences between yours and mine. Your vehicle may be a truck, your vehicle may be a diesel, your vehicle may have a different engine layout, your vehicle may be an automatic, and all of those things slightly change how a basic inspection is done. The first place we're going to start inspecting is underneath the hood, so let's find the hood latch. On my car personally, it's right here. Just pull it. On some cars, it's right around the corner here. I've seen them here as well. Now you're going to want to find your hood latch. So usually it's right in the center here. It's usually a lift up, it's usually a slide to the left. This one is just a simple lift up and then lift up your hood. Once you get your hood raised up, you're going to want to find your hood prop. Mine is right here on the passenger side. I've also seen them on the exact other side, right about here, and sometimes they are here as well. The first thing we're going to be checking out is all of the various different fluids underneath the hood. The first fluid we're going to want to check is the engine oil from this dipstick right here. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pull it out, wipe it clean, put it back in, make sure it goes all the way in, and then pull it out and check out the level. As you can see, there are those two dots. The top dot is the full line. The bottom dot is the lowest your oil should be. So we're right where we need to be. Some more notes on the oil is if it's very dark and your engine runs on gasoline, odds are you need to get your oil changed. If the oil is low on the dipstick, odds are you either have a leak or you're burning oil. If you don't have a leak and you're burning oil, a way to test it is most manufacturer specifications are if your oil is at the top dot on the dipstick and you drive 1,000 miles and it doesn't go past the bottom dot, then technically you're in spec. For most of the manufacturers that I've seen. The next thing we're going to check is the coolant level. So we want to find the reservoir, which on my car is right here. And if I shine the light down here, you can see the low level and the full level. Now you just want to put your light on top and that will tell you exactly where it is. I am slightly above full, which is good. Over time this does get lower and lower, but if you do have a great drop in coolant over a short period of time, odds are you are leaking. But if you have white smoke blowing out of your exhaust, then that could be a sign that you have a bigger issue on your hands, and I would go get that diagnosed by a shop. The next thing we're going to want to look at is our brake fluid. So usually the reservoir looks like this and you have a max and min mark. On mine, my max mark is here, my minimum mark is down in this corner over here. And the main thing you're going to want to look for is your brake fluid fairly clean? If we're to take off this cap and then take out this little debris guard, and we shine our light down there, it's kind of hard to see because the light kind of blinds it, but it's clean, right? It looks good. Now, brake fluid is not one of those fluids that you typically top off. If it leaks, you'll feel your brakes losing pressure as you're braking. And if your brake fluid is low, that typically means your brake pads are low. The next fluid we're going to be looking at is probably a fluid that a lot of you guys won't have to check because most modern vehicles have electric power steering, but mine has hydraulic power steering. So the way you're going to want to check it is just open the cap, lift it up, and if you look in there, that fluid looks good, right? It's not dark. I knew that because I've recently done a power steering service, but on mine, there's a cool min and a cool max, and then a hot min and a hot max. I can't get the camera to focus, but mine is actually slightly above what it's supposed to be considering it's cold. And the next fluid you can sometimes check is windshield washer fluid, right? Mine kind of has a dipstick thing, but it's not reading on there. But I know it's fairly full at the moment. But just top that off with windshield washer fluid. Now on most of your guys' vehicles you'd be able to check transmission fluid. On my car I can't, reasonably anyways, because it's a manual transmission, and the way you check the fluid is you pull off the fill plug and see if anything drains out. But I've done the service recently, I know it's good, and my transmission is not leaking, so I know none of it leaked out. The next thing we are going to be inspecting are the air filters. So first filter we're going to be looking at is our engine air filter, and mine is held in by these two clips. You just push them off, and then there's some hangers in the back, and you can just lift that up and get access to the filter. So like I said earlier, just lift up, pull out, remember which way it goes. If you take a look at mine's it has some stuff in it, but this one is fairly new. I'm not the one that installed this one. I know the previous owner did. Another good rule of thumb is if it's light outside, just hold this up in front of the sun, and if you get some light through it, then it's still got some life to it. And when you're reinstalling that airbox, you're gonna wanna make sure to install this back part right, I can't reach my pinky far enough here. A lot of those get missed, and sometimes you can make this fit without installing those, and then it just doesn't really filter out the air as well, because then there's a giant air leak there and it can just skip the filter and go into the engine that way. So just watch out for that. Now we're gonna check the cabin air filter, which surprisingly a lot of people don't know about, but if your car is 98 and above, depending on the model, odds are it does have one. Locations vary, but for my car and a lot of other cars, it's right behind the glove box, believe it or not. If you look closely, right here, there's this little, almost hydraulic strut to slow the glove box down. And there's a little screw on the side of it, I'll show you guys here in a second, that you're supposed to loosen in order to take the glove box out. My strut is not attached, so I don't have to worry about that. But the way you do it is, you grab both sides of the glove box and pull down. Mine comes off easy, but here's that little hydraulic strut I was talking about, and there's that little screw. But like I said, mine's not hooked up, so mine comes out easy. And now once you have it removed, or sometimes it just hangs down, you know, not all of them come off, there's this little cover here, and you can just take these two tabs, pull them down. Wow, I don't even have a cabin air filter. Now keep in mind guys, I wanted to go through this inspection with you guys. I've actually been holding off this inspection a little bit just to make a video on it. So I was expecting the cabin air filter to be just ridiculously dirty, but I mean, there's supposed to be a little filter here, and that's actually kind of a big problem that there's not, because the air for my HVAC system is not getting filtered. Like all the debris is not getting filtered or anything like that. It's just kind of funny that there ended up not being one in here. I guess once upon a time it was really dirty and someone didn't want to pay the, I don't know, $20 to buy a new filter and just install it super quick. But yeah, it's good to know that I don't have one. But then once you make sure your filter's good, you want to put the cover back on, make sure it doesn't fall off. And then in my case, you're going to want to pay attention to these two spots here. That is where the hinge is for the glove box, and if you don't install that correctly, your glove box isn't going to operate properly and latch good. So we're going to want to make sure we do that right. Yeah, and then if you're in a situation like me, you're going to want to put your hydraulic strut back first. Aim the hinges to line up, push it on, and push it closed. And now it's all back together. The next thing we're going to be looking at is tires. So first, we're going to want to make sure our pressures are good. The place where you find your tire pressure specification is right here. And on my car, if you look, front and rear is 30 psi. You're going to want to keep in mind the specs on the door jamb are cold tire pressures. So you don't want to check and adjust them right after you got off the freeway or something, because then when you come back and check them while they're cold and you adjust it to the door, you're going to come back lower than the door, if that makes sense. But for me, I just have this little gauge, reads PSI. I don't know, can't see if it's functioning or not. But I got it for like $5 at one of my local parts stores. But just pull off your valve stem cap, push this on there. And if you look at that, I am right at 31, so I'm not too crazy worried about that. But the reason I like this kind of air gauge is because it has a check valve. So when you push it onto the valve stem, it equalizes the pressure in the tire to this, and you don't have to worry about like a stick gauge moving or anything. The only way it's going to release is if you hit this button to release the pressure. Alright guys, I just ran around the whole car. All of them are about 30, 31, which is great. That means I don't have any punctures or anything like that. Now the next thing we're going to want to check for is the DOT number, which is right there, 1821. What that means is this tire was manufactured in the 18th week of 2021. DOT standards is if it's older than 7 years old, you should replace it because it's dried up, or, but, you know, sometimes I've seen tires that are only 4 years old and they're dried up. It really just depends on what conditions the car in. Is it parked outside? Is it parked inside in a cool area, etc. Now the last thing we're going to want to check is tread depth and tread wear. So if we just come over here, we can look at the tire. The tire looks like it's wearing evenly, which tire pressures also affect tire wear as well. If you have it overpressurized, it's going to wear right in the center. And if you have it underpressurized, it's going to wear right on the edges. Now typically on cars, it wears more on the inside edge anyways, just because of camber, and sometimes your toe on your alignment goes out and then you start getting some feathering. Some people have a coin trick. I don't exactly know how the whole penny measurement system works, but if you look right here, there's a little wear gauge, and that is approximately 230 seconds, which according to DOT standards, you shouldn't be driving on tires that are less than 230 seconds. But I just use this little gauge. You know, it has 30 seconds and it also has millimeters. Typically shops do 30 seconds. I'm not, at least where I live, I'm not too entirely sure why. But the way you use the gauge is you place it in the tread, you push it down, then you take it back out. And I'm right in between 5 and 6. Yeah, then you basically just want to go across the whole tire, and whatever your lowest is technically what you should mark your tires as. And my lowest was a 5. You know, my first measurement was in between 5 and 6, and then right in the center I was right at 5. Alright guys, I just went around and inspected all my tires. I found one that's about a 4, so I'm probably going to be thinking about getting some new tires here fairly soon. Just for reference, 5 is usually about half-life. Most tires come about 10, sometimes 12, sometimes more depending on the tire, but most people tires come 10, 12 brand new. But now it's time to check out some brakes. Just a side note, my car has rear drum brakes, so we are not going to be inspecting those, just because in order to inspect them properly you have to jack up the car, take off the wheel, and then take off the actual drum, which a lot of people don't really have the capacity to do that. And at least where I live, there aren't really many problems with drum brakes. You know, it's just one of those things. They last forever as long as they don't get contaminated and rust together or anything like that. So we're just going to be paying attention to the front brakes. I decided to go on the other side because it would be easier potentially for you guys to see. Trying to get a good angle for you guys. Sometimes you have to move the car a bit in order to see, but if we zoom in here on this brake pad, you guys can kind of see the thickness there. There's like this little portion here, that's the backing of the pad, and then anything inwards after that little lip is the actual brake pad material. It's kind of hard to see the thickness on camera, but that's about 7 millimeters or so, which is good considering most brakes start out as 10 to 12 as well, coincidentally. But let me show you guys what bad brake pads would be. So this is another little handy tool that especially for beginners is very helpful. But for example, my pads are in between these two. For some reason it doesn't have a 7, but that's the green one's an 8. This is a 6. Bad ones would be 3 and 2. As you can see, significantly less. This is about where mine is, in between these two. and these two would be bad. The reason this is bad is because if all the material wears away, then you have metal on metal contact with the rotor, and then you have to replace the rotors and the pads, and sometimes more depending on how long you leave it like that and what kind of damages it causes. But yeah, pretty much how this tool works is you find the one you think it is, and then you isolate it out and then fish it in there and measure, of course. The other thing you're going to want to look for that's sometimes very obvious is if you look at my front rotors, you can kind of see that weird pattern. Yeah, my front rotors are very warped, and sometimes you can feel it. I almost wish you guys could feel this, but if you run your fingers across it, you can feel the little ridges. You know, it's basically going like this all the way across. So those either need to be resurfaced or replaced depending on the thickness of the rotors. All right, now that we're done with that, we're gonna take a look for any leaks. So I'm gonna kind of show you places where things could leak: coolant, oil, transmission fluid, you know, etc. Just stuff that we can see easily from the engine bay and under the car. You know, sometimes there are some lines and places that are pretty much only accessible if you're able to lift the car. But if it's bad enough to drip fluid, you'll obviously see the drips of fluid. So let's take a look. Okay, so pretty much you're just gonna want to look around all the hoses. Like this is all coolant. These two hoses leading into the throttle body here is all coolant. So you'll see, in my car's example anyways, a pinkish leak around there, you know, and I want to make the distinction between a leak and a seep. So if you look around my intake manifold there, it's kind of hard to get the light to not seem so ridiculously bright. So if you look back there, notice how it's almost like slightly dusty and almost looks like it's about to leak? That's a seep, okay? So that's not dripping fluid yet. Who knows how long that's been there? Probably a while based off the look of the seep. But yeah, that seep, I'm not too worried about it because it looks fairly old. It doesn't look very wet. It doesn't really look like it's going to leak anytime soon, right? If it was wet, I might be a little bit more concerned. If it was dripping, then I'd be concerned because I don't want it to turn into a bigger problem or stay in my driveway or my garage or anything like that. But I would really only be concerned with seeps on a couple things, and that's very situational. Like for example, on Honda V6s, on the Bank 2 spool valve on newer Hondas, if that starts leaking, it leaks directly onto the alternator and then takes out your alternator at some point. You know, it's not gonna take it out right away, but it's not a if, it's a when. So, you know, it could get taken out in a week, it could get taken out in 6 months. But that's one of those things, if it's seeping, I recommend replacing that and just saving yourself the trouble. Yeah, so you're basically just gonna wanna look around. Look at places where you think it could potentially leak. There's an old leak down there that you guys might be able to see. I didn't clean that off too good because on these, it's a very common problem for the timing chain tensioner to leak. And mine did have that problem, but I was able to fix that. Yeah, from up above, I don't see anything too crazy obvious, so let's take a look down below. Again, I don't see anything too concerning. I'm hoping it focuses for you guys. I see, like, there's my transmission. Looks very clean. Nothing to be too concerned about. I know my axle boots are shot though, so that's pretty much only a matter of time before I need to replace axles, but that's for another day. Yeah, guys, I didn't see any leaks, so I'm not too crazy worried about it. Most of the seeps are either not too big of a concern or are there from previous times, like that timing chain tensioner was leaked everywhere and then just gathered a bunch of dirt and created a seep. And I just didn't clean it off very good apparently. I thought I did, but I'll have to clean that off later so I don't have any confusion in the future. Now we're gonna move on to suspension. So this one is gonna be a little bit trickier to show you guys how to inspect it. Like there's some physical things that we can do to inspect the suspension, but visually it's gonna be kind of hard to show, but I'm gonna try my best. So let's go down. I got my wheel turned. Let me get my light out. And the first thing we're gonna wanna look at is we're gonna wanna look at this boot up here. As you can see, mine is torn. My Corolla has, I believe, 116,000 miles now. And to my understanding, these are the stock struts. So I could technically replace them for ride quality, but it's not too crazy important at the time. And then if you look in there, my tie rod end is seeping a little bit. That's where my light is focusing the most. That you're just going to grab and wiggle up and down. It will turn side to side. Like if you moved your hand like this, it will spin around. So that movement isn't necessarily bad, but if you move it up and down and it makes a clicking sound, that means it's bad. Then you have your sway bar end link. It's this long rod that goes up. When those get a little play, you get a slight clunking, sometimes a major clunking in the front of your car. And basically those just help prevent your car from having a bunch of body roll. And then this is your axle. It's kind of hard to see, but if you look in there, like up here, you can see that my boot is torn, but let me see if I can maybe get the camera in there. Yeah, no, that's kind of hard to see. And then you're obviously going to want to look at your strut overall. When they become bad, you'll either hear clunking or your suspension isn't working very good, or you'll have a leak from where my light is focused and it'll be dripping down. It'll start out as a seep and then it'll eventually lead to a leak. Yeah, once they start leaking, then they're for sure bad and they won't have any of those properties, but I'll show you a test how to check that. Okay, now I'm gonna show you guys how to check if your suspension is still doing its job, if you will. So what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna want to go to one corner of the car, and you're gonna wanna jounce it. Right, so if you notice on my car, I push it down and it goes right back up, right? There's no boom, 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 boom. If it does go boom, 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 your suspension shot. The shock part of the strut is not doing its job, right? Which can be a safety hazard for sure. But you go around, do that to all four corners, make sure none of your suspension is blown. Usually when you jounce a corner like that, you'll hear a noise if your sway bar end link's bad, if your strut's bad. You'll be able to visually see too much movement. So I'm gonna go around each corner and do that. All of my corners jounced perfectly. There was no obnoxious clunking noise or anything like that. So my suspension is good. That tie rod end wasn't great, along with that strut boot. But that boot is just a dust boot, right? Just because that boot is ripped doesn't mean you need to replace it. That just means dust can now get in to the actual suspension mechanism and wear it out faster. Okay, the next test we're gonna wanna do is wipers. Just pull back, make sure they actually missed up, make sure there are no crazy streaks. These are new wipers, so I know that's not the case. Move to every mode. Make sure it works in every single mode, because sometimes you'll need that kind of different mode. Now we're going to move on to the full light check. I mean, pretty much every single light, from the gauge cluster to the interior lights to the exterior lights. So if we flip on our gauge cluster, we should see some lights and some should disappear. The oil pressure light's not going to disappear because the engine's not running. The check engine light's not going to disappear because the engine's not running. The battery light's not going to disappear because the engine's not running. The brake light's on because my parking brake's on, right? But I obviously don't want to roll into my garage. The door's open. As soon as I close the door, that goes away. As soon as I buckle up, the seatbelt light will go away. But pretty much every light should come on. Some should go away. Which in our case, really only one goes away. And I'm not going to show you guys that the lights will go away because my garage is closed. I don't want to start the car in an enclosed area, and my wife is asleep at the moment. It's approximately 2:30 in the morning or so. So we're just going to move on with the test. We're going to want to check our interior lights. That one works good. The center one works good. And now we're going to check exterior lights. This is much easier to do with a partner, but thankfully we're in 2024 and pretty much everyone has a phone, so you can set up a recording of the rear. The fronts, it's pretty self-explanatory. You turn the headlights on, turn the high beams on, turn the signals on, fog lights on. You should be able to see it, especially if you're up against a wall. But the rears, it's kind of hard because, the brake lights kind of blend together, and sometimes the center high mounted one or the spoiler one doesn't come on and you don't even realize. So I'm gonna pose up the camera for you guys and I'm gonna run through the test. Now we just have one more thing to check, and that's going to be our spare tire, as well as the tools to change a spare on the side of the road, because for some reason a lot of people like to take them out. A lot of people like to lose those tools, and for the most part a lot of people neglect the spare tire in general. Like, you know, obviously over time it's going to lose pressure, so most people's spare tire has no air, and then when they go to put it on, well, they just have another flat, just a donut for the most part. So let's check that out. We're going to start by opening up the trunk. My trunk release is here. And then obviously you're gonna wanna come up and open up the trunk. Don't mind the little mess, but here we are. So what we're gonna wanna check is we're gonna wanna pull the carpet as well as the cardboard out. So I have my spare, I have my tools, I have my little jack on the side of the road, and then I have jumper cable that I included in here. You know, just in case. You never know when you're gonna need a jump. And then there's one other thing that I honestly recommend people start putting in their cars. It's a very simple bike pump. Now I know what you're thinking. Why would I need a bike pump? Well, for some reason, people don't think about the fact that you can use a bike pump to pump up your tires. Now I know what else you're gonna say. Why don't I just get a cigarette lighter, compressor, or battery powered compressor? You could do that and it would obviously make the process faster, but I don't know about you, but I have never ever seen a bike pump fail. And I remember when I was in California, I had a nail in my tire, but I couldn't afford to patch it because, you know, I was some broke college kid. I would just pump up my tire, you know, with the bike pump. And yes, people take a lot of photos of you. But hey, it got me through it. It was very reliable. I've never seen one break, so I always keep it in the back there just in case. You know, you go to put your spare on and it's flat. You have a bike pump to pump it up. A bonus one I'm going to include for you guys is to look at your battery. Right, look at the date it was manufactured, minus 1222, so it's not too crazy old, it's a year and a half old. Check your battery connections. Right, pull this off. Check your battery connections, they're good. Make sure there's no corrosion on them. Make sure you have a battery tie down, you know, that's important. But that's also one of those things I've seen, like the crappiest of crappy looking batteries that are 7 years old still test good, and some batteries that are only 3 months old test bad. So that's one of those things. I left it in there as a bonus, just so you can look for loose terminals, check if you have your battery tie down, check if there's any corrosion building up, because those are things you can visually see and determine if maybe something's not correct. If your battery cables aren't on there properly, your alternator is not going to be able to charge the battery and support your whole system with power. If there's corrosion, sometimes that can mess with the electronics. If there's no battery tie down, the battery can get shaken up, which is really not good. You know, it can cause a no start condition for a bit and actually destroy the little plates inside of the battery. So just make sure you have your battery tie down. All right, guys, that ends this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys learned something from it. I hope one of you out there actually goes and inspects your car and finds that it's missing the cabin air filter like mine, or, you know, finds out their brake fluid is low and their brake pads are at like a 2, because that's pretty much the whole point of this video. Obviously, you can go to a dealership and have them do a free multi-point inspection, and they're gonna try to sell you on some stuff, and they'll be able to lift the car up and actually get a very deep dive look into it. But this is supposed to be a quick 5 to 10 minute inspection. You know, you just run around the car really quick, make sure everything's in good order for the most part, and be on your way, because I feel like a lot of people don't do that. And I feel like doing that can lead you down the rabbit hole of doing stuff on your own. For example, you find out your tail light's out. It's not very hard to replace a taillight, guys. You know, you can YouTube a lot of the stuff that you go to your mechanic for and surprisingly do it on your own with basic hand tools. If you guys remember, I once upon a time owned an Accord that I did an engine swap on, and I did it all with this DeWalt tool setup here. I pretty much did it all. Like 95% of the tools I used was from that basic hand tool set. You know, I feel like a lot of people worry about having the best tools or something like that, but you could go to, you know, one of your local parts stores, or, you know, like a Home Depot or Lowe's, and just buy a generic set, because, You know, the snap-on tools, the macro tools, the Mac tools, etc. Those are meant for everyday use, beating on them for years and years. You know, you don't need top-of-the-line stuff to do basic work on your car. Yeah, like I said, guys, I hope you guys learned a lot. I hope you guys actually go and do an inspection on your car. You know, if you watch this video and you end up doing an inspection, let me know what you guys find. Let me know what crazy stuff you guys find. Because like I said, I went through this inspection pretty much not knowing everything, like the cabin air filter. I had no idea there was no cabin air filter. I'm definitely going to be buying one tomorrow. You know, obviously you can live with that one, but if the car is designed to have one, it's good to have it. But if you guys enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Hope you guys have a great day, and we'll see you guys in the next one.